And we are live. I am joined by my good friend and very talented artist who lives across the ditch from me in Australia. We say that in terms of the trans-Tasman, whatever the relationship is, in New Zealand. Zoe. Zoe is a Gamma Partner artist. She's been very well collected, very well respected artist on Bitcoin who has also been dabbling with teleburning, which has been super fun. So we definitely need to touch on that. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We are here to talk about what remains with you. But before we get there, Zoe, how have you been? And, for people who don't know who you are, give a reintroduction. I'm hoping that people are either going to watch this, it's live right now, or they're going to listen to it afterwards. But yeah, how are you?
Yeah, cool. Thank you. And thank you for taking the time to speak with me today. It's really cool. I'm good. I'm here in New Zealand in my little garage studio. And we're in December, so things are kind of wrapping up for the year here and it's all getting a bit hot. But in terms of what I do and where I've kind of come from, I've been a physical artist for some time, some background time, and I got into NFTs in late 2021, like most people did, and spent most of my time on ETH with physicals and with just digital work as well. And in early last year, I made a bit of a pact to myself. I was like, I really just want to get something on Bitcoin. I had no idea like what that took or like who to talk to or how hard that would be, like the cost of it. I just promised myself that I would just get one thing on in 2024. And I followed that journey, figured it out in April and got my first artwork on, and it was way easier and way more straightforward than I thought. So I kind of continued on that, and a lot of what Bitcoin is kind of what I thought NFTs were, I guess. I did like that permanence about it all, and I just continued there. And I guess like everyone, your time is quite finite, so I decided that I would focus all of my work being there, like going forward into the future as far as I can pay for it to be there. You always kind of feel like you're racing against the clock a little bit. But yeah, so that was April 24, and I have continued since, and I haven't minted anywhere else since kind of mid 24. So I got a bit orange pilled, I guess you'd say. But it's been cool. I've met really cool people. Some collectors have come with me across, and I've seen those people teleburn their assets on ETH across to Bitcoin, which has been interesting discussions and interesting things to think about there. I encourage that with my work, especially work that's on kind of platform contracts, the early stuff. I'm happy to help move that one across. So that's been interesting what I've done during the last couple of years. I've also released a couple of big collections as well as prints with, small print runs kind of in between is kind of how I operate. So this is my last big collection for the year. It's probably my last work that'll hit the chain by the time Christmas rolls round. But yeah, I love it. Really, really fortunate.
It certainly has been quite the journey. It's amazing how time flies, really. And you have, like you said, mixed up between bigger parent-child collections, and then some pieces have been teleburn, and then the print runs, which also then have the original, and the code for the prints points back at the original, so they provably linked. It's been an interesting, I guess, juxtaposition. You have some of your one-of-one collectors, you have your collections which are all one-of-ones, and then the ability for you to sort of spread your wings and gain more collectors and have that price point, which is different for prints compared to the one-of-one collections, of course, as they should be, where you get to have more collectors, pardon me, and invite more people into your journey. I'd love for you to, discuss just the different ways that you've approached it and why they've spoken to you.
Yeah, for sure. I like to do the prints because you do get to connect with people with a wider group of people. I also like to do them. I do them quite small. It's not very traditional, but here we are, not doing traditional things. I do them quite small because I really like that time capsule. You know, like who was following my work or interested in what I've been doing in the ecosystem during that time. You know, I haven't wanted, well, up until now, I haven't wanted a print to run over a long, like, inscribing time. I've always wanted it to be, you know, within a month, if I'm lucky, you know, of what I offer. Because I feel like if you bought that print, it was obvious that you were there at that time. You know, it's quite, yeah, time driven. So that's why I like to get those ones out there. And there's always someone that takes a fancy in the original as well, which is such an interesting dynamic in that. So that kind of keeps things ticking over as work comes up in the studio, you know, those kind of single works as I'm working on bigger collections. Bigger collections take longer to bring a larger idea together. And for me, they hold more why, more concept, I guess. Um, and it's a bit of keeping me, you know, how much am I giving back to, you know, am I, I don't know, like keeping me, what would I say, to a standard. So bringing these big collections together is always fun. When I get to the end of it, I'm like, oh, we're inscribed. And then I'm like, oh, now we've got to think about distributing it. So there's kind of two levels to it.
Of course, and you've played with on-chain metadata, and like you said, you've done really well, and as you should. But tip of the hat, the originals are getting picked up, and collected, and there are people who are always keeping an eye on your work, and you've had over the journey new collectors pop up, and all of a sudden there'll be a new address, perhaps that it just picks up a print rather than the original. That must be interesting as almost 2 years of inscribing on Bitcoin has gone on for you.
Yeah, that's always fascinating when someone finds your Twitter profile or your work. Some people have found my work through Gamma, I think, directly, or you kind of see how they move. Or they find your Twitter profile and then they go into your Gamma stuff. It blows my mind that I don't know, that people continue to find your work. You know, you feel like the ecosystem's getting smaller and smaller, and then someone will pop up and you're like, oh, and you just have this cool conversation. And then you have this kind of history that you can go through with them. You know, they get a chance to look back at what you've done. You've got a bit of a portfolio there on Bitcoin, which is cool too. And then I have some cool diehard collectors that have been like through the whole 2 years, which is, yeah, equally very lucky.
Definitely. And you mentioned that some collectors have come with you from the ETH side. It must be interesting then when they want to tell a burn. For people who are listening or watching this and not sure what that means, essentially that in its simplest form just means burn it from ETH, inscribe it on Bitcoin. Each inscription on Bitcoin has a teleburn address, so an ETH burn address that shows you that it's the ETH piece was provably burnt. Again, this is not to knock ETH. I think that art belongs on all chains. I think that all chains are a playground for different pieces and different artists and different styles, and people can experiment in different places. But like you said, Bitcoin is the most permanent. It must be interesting then to have those discussions with those collectors who would like to do that and then bring those pieces to Bitcoin. Yeah, tell me about some of those. Obviously don't need to name the collectors, but tell me about some of those discussions and just like how that's evolved for you.
Yeah, one of the more recent ones was, like, I have contracts on OpenSea, Known Origin, and Foundation early on, and then I got on to Manifold, which is, yeah, a better kettle of fish to work with. But the ones on Known Origin, I kind of contacted each collector. There's just 9 there. Just saying, do we want to look at doing other things on ETH with it, or I know how to do this teleburn way. I'm doing lots of things on Bitcoin. If I can walk you through that. But yeah, the few people that have wanted to do something have chosen to teleburn across to Bitcoin because I know the rhythm better, so I can like explain it better. And then it's hopefully, this is it. But it's cool because then you get to step through that process with something that they've already got. You know, they've already got the asset to take it through, and you end up with quite an interesting provenance with the work. So discussions have been open. Some people are totally new to ordinals. Some will already have ordinals, and it's quite an easy process. Some have asked me. I think the first one I did, someone went to my ETH and said, "Can I have this one on ordinals?" And I was like, "Oh, have to have a look at that." So yeah, it came to me before I went out searching for it. But yeah, so the ones that I had on those early contracts that I still owned, I bought across to Bitcoin. Just how I'm setting it up, I don't recommend anything to anyone like in what's happening, but yeah, how I want to go with it. I think it's an interesting conversation.
Certainly, and each artist can operate and do what they want, and have those discussions with the collectors. Certainly, it's something that's felt authentic to you. It is really interesting the way in which you create, because, like you said, initially or originally before NFTs, ordinals, you were creating physically. You're still creating physically, and then you're bringing it to the digital realm. Some of your art doesn't last. It's a super ephemeral. We're going to get to what remains with you, which is it comes with physical, so obviously they're going to last. So that's certainly something that I'd like to discuss. But yeah, tell me about the pieces that you create and how they don't last, and then you are preserving them on Bitcoin. I know that a lot of your prints were like that. Some of the collections that you've already put out, well, you correct me if I'm wrong, but a bouquet of intimate passings, I can't imagine that they lived on.
No, they didn't. They wilted. Yeah, that process, all of my prints, I want to say all of my prints are so they're all done on a mirror with paint, acrylic paint, and roses, and it's all very fluid. The mirror is obviously like reflection, bringing that into play. Often you don't see that in the final product, but it is very much part of the process. It also is quite a smooth surface to work with, which is a different dynamic with paint. And paint talks to the suffocation of the petals. Paint is acrylic is plastic, really. And then the petals is obviously fragile, once beating, once alive, once blooming, and that kind of circle of life. And I often sit there and watch them wilt, like I literally have these from my previous collection. Like they'll sit in my studio for like a month, and then I'll go, okay, we better throw them out because it's all getting weird now. But it's fascinating. Like I'll just sit there and watch what they've done over time. And in that process, I'm capturing as I'm going. So it's very fluid. Most times I don't get anything. The sessions where I do get something is what you guys see, is what I choose to bring forward. And there's always a learning or something I've lived or something I've thought about that comes through in that work. And for me, it articulates it in a way that nothing else could. And then onto the computer, those prints are often not like worked with digitally very much. They're just compressed in Photoshop, colors tweaked a bit just to get what was already there. And then from there, it goes on chain as a JPEG. It's been fun. I so enjoy doing those works. It's so messy. It's so in the moment and engaging. And that's quite cool to put in like an immortal place. It's quite a cool conversation that happens. But yes, none of those exist here with me. And same with the bouquet of intimate passings. The work after that, the collection earlier this year, that was flowers. That was probably more of a photography setup. It was more 3D dynamic that I played around with the bouquet and tulle and things. Again, that doesn't exist. The tulle does. I find it fascinating. I've thought about maybe what I could do with it, but that's the only thing that remains physically. which is why it's all intentionally digital, but it's very much made with hands, I guess.
Yeah, it's so interesting to bring something that is so physical and something that you've manipulated and something that's been hands on and would be seen as somewhat traditional, and then bringing it to Bitcoin and it is digital and it doesn't last. And you were mentioning the tool that was from As the Veil Falls. That's
Yes,
fascinating. Yeah, that
yeah,
must.
I think I've raised it with you, like what ideas around what I could do with it, well, where it could go, but yeah, I haven't got to a place with that, whether I will or not, but it's hanging out with me. It's cool.
And with your prints, and obviously then in comparison to As the Veil Falls, it's funny. I remember when we did a little spotlight on, well, not little, we did a spotlight on photography, and I included one of your pieces, and you said, "Oh, that's cool. I never sort of really thought of my work as photography, and although it's not traditionally photography, you are photographing your work." And you said with As the
Mm.
Veil Falls, it was more of a photo shoot, 3D setup. Obviously, it was still quintessentially very Zoe Louise. But yeah, have you thought more about that? How you are using photography as part of the process, at least, and how that plays into what you create and I guess, the final output?
Yeah, I have as I go on more because people bring it to my attention. Like, yeah, and I'm like, well, of course, like this is all photos, and especially the series that I'm releasing in a couple of days, What Remains with You, really brings that light into it, and I'm pretty sure that's the definition of photography. I guess I don't put myself in that category because people in that category are geniuses and brilliant with all their lenses. I've hung out with photographers and they just have a different mind of how they capture things and how they create art. Whereas I feel like I've come in with paint and petals and found a camera to, like come in from a different angle. So I would never put myself in a photographer just because that's kind of like an elite form of art, whereas I'm like mashing things together. Yeah, but it is like these are photographs. What I've just described, um, and what you get is the kind of the light and the petals taken away from that photograph, and what's left, and that's you actually get my whole process. This is the first time a collector can really feel the whole the whole. The first time I've released that, so that's exciting that I've got to that point.
Definitely. Well, I wouldn't discredit yourself too much, to be honest. I know that you don't want to consider yourself a photographer, and I'm not trying to label you as one either. However, if people do have a look at your profile on Gamma, which we will look at soon, you're still using light. You're setting up the shot. There's vivid colors. It's all framed. So whether you realize you're
Mm.
doing it or not, you're certainly doing it. Speaking of how What Remains with You, I suppose, sums up your whole process. It's a bit of a broad question, but how do you see your process now, and how has it changed perhaps over the last couple of years?
Um, I feel like I've gone deeper with it. The first work I put out, like with Mirror, when like with Mirror was on ETH, was let me get that right. I'm going to say early 23 was like the first Mirror works, and then early 24 was when the pedals came in. So we're nearing 2 years with kind of the pedals and the Mirror, which is kind of the crux of what I do. I feel like it's more like it is me. Like I guess you're kind of exploring, but I'm like, there's so much here. Like the more I explore, the more doors open into what I do with it. I do it because it stimulates so much in me. Is the main reason why I do it. It stimulates so many thoughts, memories, dreams, lots of different things come together just by playing with paint and petals. So maybe I feel that it's more of an accepted process just because I'm more comfortable with it. I don't know how anyone else takes it, but yeah, that this is it. It's kind of not just made up. It came from a few things as time went on. Maybe I'm more comfortable with it. I feel deeper in it, and I feel, yeah, excited about it. I don't think I've even touched what I can do with it.
That's really interesting. And obviously, we've talked about it before. It's not the only place that your art came from, but we've both had a very shared, painful experience. And if we have a look at I guess just some of the titles of your work, A Strange Calm, Resilience of Innocence, Into the Blue, Unruly, Dust Once Silk. There's a number of them people can go have a look at. It's very emotive work, and you're clearly using light and color and texture to portray that emotion.
Yes, yeah, it's all pulled from loss, from the unraveling of that and the continuation of that. That's where I get most of my input into my art from. So it's something I've lived, and then the learnings from that as well, and the social interactions that come with that, and the unexpected things that come with that. Very much funnel into that would be my biggest inspiration in my work.
For sure. And just to dig a little bit deeper with that, where do you derive the names from? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but just from looking at your portfolio, your full body of work, which people can find on Gamma if they type in Zoe Louise, and we'll pull it up in a minute. But obviously, for people who are listening, they're not going to see it. Talk to us about the naming of your work. Is it quite important to you?
Yeah, a piece isn't finished until it's got a name. Like, sometimes I'll share these big canvases on Twitter, and if they don't have a name, it's just kind of, it's the layer I'm up to, or it's just a thought. But until a canvas or a digital work settles with a name, then we're going. And that's often what doesn't come in the works that don't come through, is that it doesn't pull anything from me. It might be like a good composition, or the colours might flow, but it doesn't kind of pull at that vein that I wanted to bring through, And when the name settles that, and often there'll be a little kind of blurb after that. Sometimes it's larger, sometimes it's just a few more words to explain, or to maybe lead someone down a path. But yeah, sometimes the name comes first. I'll be working with an idea or a statement that I've written down on my phone over the weeks previous, trying to bring that through. Sometimes it's pure play that comes forward, and then it pulls from something else I've thought about, and it ties together, and it's this really like, holy, there's magic that can happen in the world kind of feeling, and that goes forward. So naming is, important, I would say.
You can really tell, and people can certainly explore that inside As the Veil Falls and A Bouquet of Intimate Passings, where each piece has an individual name and has that name on chain, which means that the name is going to live forever. Well, as long as forever is on Bitcoin, which is anyone's guess, but we know at the moment it's definitely as forever as we can imagine and the most permanent. Just to elaborate on that naming, the fact that the name goes on chain with the piece, how's that been for you? I guess, how does it make you feel, and the importance of that?
That was one of the interesting things about going digital, even in NFTs. The name it's so right there with the artwork. Like, it never leaves the artwork when you're viewing it on a digital, or, on the platforms and on Twitter and things like that. Whereas in real life, in a canvas, there might be a name in a gallery, but you take it home, and the name is just inside your head. The visitors don't see the name. The name is lost, or it comes through after. But with digital work, it's right there. And that was quite interesting to me. That I found that quite a point to play on, I guess, because we don't have that in the physical world. So yeah, and the inscriptions, like you see the JPEG and the name, and the artist is like right there. And that's why I often, with these bigger collections, just put the name. there's more detail in the parent, or there's more detail in my notes somewhere else where you can go squirrel about. But, the name and the work, that is enough. That's it for me.
That's quite interesting. Yeah, you typically do put a longer description, more long form information in the parent. So, yeah, I think it's a good time to talk about parent child. For people who don't know what that means, essentially what it means is that each piece of art that Zoe creates is linked on chain on Bitcoin to, I guess, like a family tree of her work. So, regardless of Gamma, regardless of any other platform on Bitcoin, all the work is linked together. The collections are on chain, tied together. Tell us about your exploration of parent child and how that's evolved, and I guess from when you started using it to now. Obviously, all of your originals, and now each of the longer form collections have used it.
Yeah, I didn't know about it when I first came to Ordinals. And then I knew about, you spoke to me about it when I was going to release the bouquet collection of 27. It was my first collection artwork. It wasn't just prints. Um, and it's this foreign, parent child. And I'm like, what? And then I had to figure out how I was going to do that. But I wanted my metadata still, and I wanted my other things. And it was all a very new concept. Now it's just part of day-to-day life, but it was quite bizarre to me that you had to set up your collection structure, your network of artwork online. So I used it for the first collection, but I didn't quite understand like a grandparent, that you had to go, one above to get the full effect of a tree. So that came in later, but in 2020, this beginning of this year, I was like, I need to set this thing up, spend some time to think about it. And that's interesting in itself, how you'll set it up. You'll kind of get it wrong, but you want to get it quite enough to link through. And I really wanted this little point in it where it would be, I've called it notes, but it would be like a place that is artwork it's not for sale. They're just like thoughts, or I guess portraits of me as an artist going forward. I just wanted this place where someone could kind of find, and maybe see some thoughts about me later down the track that was separate to my artwork, but made it more of a whole, which is something interesting about parent child. Like you can do anything with it. Like it's really creative, and it's such a cool point. Not even just provenance, it's just a cool kind of structure to work with. So yeah, now I've got a bit of the down low on what to do and how to structure it. But you can play with that. Like the parent is now something I think about. What will the parent look like? Whereas the first collection I didn't really consider that. But the parent I did for my previous collection, I did it as a 4 mega. And I was like, there's so much metaphor going on there. Like I want to do this. So I did that, yeah, which is like something you can't do if you don't do parent child. You can't have this kind of header, this thing you can't touch.
Hats off on that 4 mega, by the way, because as Bitcoin, I know that Bitcoin's down right now, but irrelevant.
I was like,
As
I've got to
Bitcoin,
get this on by the end of the month. I'm going to not be able to afford it. But here we are.
well, exactly. It's still not cheap to do, and it will only become more expensive as time goes on, if Bitcoin does what we think it will do. But that aside, it will become harder to, perhaps honestly, unless someone's really willing to cough up, almost impossible to get a 4 mega on chain. There aren't that many. And for people who don't know what that means, essentially, a Bitcoin block can only fit up to 4 megabytes worth of data, which means that Zoe's parent for her last collection, As the Veil Falls, was the whole block, which is very special. It's historic. It's not like you own the block, but you own that little piece of history. That's quite interesting.
It's fascinating. And I wanted it specifically to be that I couldn't sell that 4 mega. Like you can't touch that, you can't own that, but you can own what falls beneath that. So there was a play on purity and things like that. With that, maybe in time I'll do one that someone can own. But that was so important for me that it was that area in the structure. But it was a lot harder. Like I knew it was going to cost, an amount of money. But it was technically hard. I'm like, help, like as I'm going, and then you had to time a few things, and it made me, respect the chain more. You're right there, and you're like, it's it's brilliant. It's like really raw. It was thrilling to do. Like, yeah, I really enjoyed it.
So yeah, I've really appreciated how much you've embedded yourself into Bitcoin and what's possible. We've touched on some of the things such as parent-child, on-chain metadata, releasing originals with prints, these longer form collections that are cohesive, inscribing a 4 mega, thinking about all of the structure. And you did mention at the beginning of our chat just how orange-pilled you've become. Are you a little bit, for lack of a better word, have you almost been surprised at how
Mm.
into it you've gotten?
Yeah, yeah. I do wonder if I do think like if I was full time, here full time all day, every day, that I might have kept ETH or Tezos around, just because you've got more bandwidth to reason why you do things. And but for me, like my bandwidth is quite small. And the only reason why I want to bring digital into my work is the permanence. Like that is that's the most fascinating thing I think we've got going on here. But if I dive deeper, there's really fascinating things without that too. Like that's cool. But yeah, I had to make a decision. Like, yeah, how much time have I got? And I am surprised that I'm a bit of a Bitcoin artist. Like that's weird. I don't feel like that. It's just where I hang out. And I remember like buying Bitcoin in 2020, no, 2017, and it just being like this crazy, yeah. And to think that now my art's on it or like there is pretty cool. Like two things that have been a part of my life for some time now exist a little bit together. And yeah, I'm surprised that I'm Bitcoin. But I feel very comfortable. Like I can't imagine doing it any other way with what I know.
Makes sense. Yeah, 20 class of 2017, which is similar to myself. So we've been around. That's why it's been
Yes.
so inspiring and kind of incredible that yeah, you can put art on Bitcoin now. You can put the art on chain and have it tied to sats and have it collectible, which is very special.
Mm.
So it's a great time to pull up your profile and then we'll have a look at the star of the show, the collection that we're here to talk about, which is What Remains With You. But first, people can have a look at your full body of work, which if they look up Zoe Louise, they can scroll through and have a look at your prints, your long form collections. How do you feel when you see it all together like this?
It's cool. Gamma's done such a cool job of yeah, compiling it all together and creating those profiles. I like it. We just updated my website as well the other night, and yeah, I was like, oh, that's cool. I guess you have a little bit of a moment like, wow, I have done a little bit, in the last couple of years. But I love these profiles. I think they're really, really cool.
And as you mentioned, you've just updated your website. I always encourage collectors. I mentioned this actually not that long ago in a live stream with Pavel Dulko. He also updates and keeps his website very current, and it's a great website, as is yours. Collectors should go to the artist's website. You can find it on the collection pages, you can find it on Zoe's profile. It's a great place to become that little bit more intimate with the artist, because as much as it's showcased in a really elegant way on Gamma, Zoe can put a lot more information. She can personalize it, much more the way she wants on her website. And yeah, I guess it's a way that people can contact you in different ways. You've been super accessible. Like you said, I know a number of collectors. You DM with them, you have conversations with them. Before we get to What Remains With You, I guess just touch on, yeah, why do you update your website? Why do you feel it's important to have a website? And also just touch on how you have had conversations with collectors, spent time with them, spent time discussing you and your work and their feelings about your work. And I know that some collectors have had physicals delivered already as well.
Yeah, I think website, I feel like I was a bit kind of late to the party. I kind of got hung up on a website because I always think of a website as, I guess, the finished portfolio. But once I changed my mind on that it's a work in progress, it became more accessible to put one out there, because I'm always like, oh, it's not finished, or I haven't got this, or there's so much you can do with websites, and people have some really exquisite ones. But for me, I was like, well, you got to begin, you got to have one, and then you can work on it. So I'm quite slow on it. I'm really happy with how it looks at the moment. I've just brought in some, I guess, a little bit of information about what is art on Bitcoin. I start thinking about, I have a little community of, I guess, traditional artists that I keep in contact with. And I'm like, oh, I wonder what they think when they come to my website, and could they share that with other people, or could, yeah. So I think that's important to put on there. Yeah, it's interesting to think who comes to your website and what they're looking for. But I view websites as work in progress. It's just like a time capsule. And then it doesn't get updated for a couple of months and you're a bit behind time. But at the moment, it's looking quite good. I like it. It's quite clean as well. Like nowzq.com is easy to share with people. And then when you've got a website, you've got someone on your page, they can't click, get distracted by too many other things. That, like, you've got them. It's really, yeah, they're really powerful places.
That's really true. That's a nice way of putting it. And just to touch on the relationships that you have forged with collectors, I know you have some collectors who own quite a few pieces of your work, and quite a few, they're all important, but quite a few of your, say, your one of ones or other more important originals and whatnot.
Yeah, I guess that just happens over time as you release work. Some collectors, I guess, the people, they all kind of act differently in how they collect. Some like to have those conversations after they collect. Some are a bit more reserved, probably how I would be, um, and just want to have that for me, And I guess you get to know how each operates, and you hope, yeah, that you provide something for everyone. But I'm very much, yeah, open to conversations. I think it's probably one of the coolest things that we've got here is that you can, like, buy an artist's artwork and then you can just have a conversation with them. Sometimes I dive into process and how work comes about, and they can be, some are fascinated that they didn't know how it came about, and you get to share that. And yeah, some we converse more on why work comes about. Yeah, just people, all across the world. It's really cool.
It is really cool. And you mentioned some of the traditional artists that you're still in touch with, and you have, and I saw you post about it, a document about what is art on Bitcoin. And I think that you've simplified it and explained it really well. What have they thought? How do you explain about what you do when they perhaps knew you beforehand, not
Mm,
releasing work digitally in the way that you do?
mm. Yeah, there's a couple of, they follow it quite closely, so and maybe it's kind of normal to them, I guess. Like, they kind of know about crypto, and they know about art, and they kind of know these two things are linked. That you would need crypto to buy it. So I guess those people don't have. It's just a bit normal that I do this. But, like, I was talking to an art mentor of mine a couple of years ago, and she's uh, further on in her career and, like, brilliant artist. And she was wondering, her biggest thing was like, do you make money? Like, is there any money in it? I was like, that's fascinating that would be your point, like, is there an ecosystem there? I don't know if she got her head around it or not, but I think about her often because I'm like, yeah, right. She's very traditional. I don't know if she's even seen my work, but she comments on my canvases. That's known to her. So one day maybe we'll bring that together.
That is quite interesting. And obviously, there is the financial aspect, and selling it. Your artists are still selling art But more than that, and I love that you use the word legacy in the description for what remains with you. It's a legacy thing, and that must be an
Mm.
interesting conversation to be had. I feel it's a very important conversation to be had. I've spoken with some artists who, and I completely understand why, have queried the cost of inscribing on Bitcoin. And regardless of if the piece sells, and I hope that all artist pieces sell, you have still preserved your legacy. And I feel like that's hugely impactful and worth the price.
Yeah. I think when I break down, I guess the price, I think we compare it to like Tezos or ETH, which is awfully cheap, I guess, for like what you get with it. But like I pay probably just as much for a raw canvas, like a in real life canvas. So it's just another canvas, but this one is fascinating, whereas this is too. But so I don't consider it overly expensive at the moment. So you're always kind of racing against time, which time is such a fascinating thing. But I'm like, I need more artwork. I wish I had more to put on. Like I go as kind of as I can. There's nothing in the background that can come on chain.
Totally. And it sounds like it's become a very healthy addiction, so to speak. So we have the collection up. I'll scroll through. We can have a look at more of the work. Tell us about what remains with you. What are we looking at here? What is this collection? How did it come to be? Where did it start? Anything that you want to tell us about it. Each of the pieces is named. We can see scars embodied. Blossoms are, well, I need to click on that to be able to see the full name. Let me do it now. Blossoms I'll Never Sit Under. Again, very powerful and emotive names. So quintessentially Zoe, but different at the same time.
Yeah, this collection, the technique, I guess the flowers on paper and the paint, and that you would have the paper left over, is something I thought about just after the bouquet of intimate passing. So back into last year, I've still got photos of like work that I was playing around with, that there's a concept there. There's something conversing, like when you've just left with the paper, as opposed to the whole artwork disintegrating in front of you. So I had that, and I've always been taken by people's stories or legacies that they will leave behind that are really subtle and what they've done with their life, but they are, if you kind of think about it on a bigger picture, they are often more profound than the visual things that people make or be. And I think I wanted to, yeah, shine a light on that kind of legacy. Legacy is obviously a word that comes up often with Bitcoin and Bitcoin art, and people speak of that's what we're doing here. And yeah, these three things came together quite easily. That it would be this technique that I would use to convey that kind of legacy as subtraction, that you would be the one who embodied all the pain so it wouldn't be passed on, that you wouldn't do to others what had been done to you. Lots of stories I've heard that have sat with me. Yeah, and just how kind of subtle that is into making change for the future. So this collection, like as I was sharing it, even on my website and on Twitter, I'm like, oh, it's quite subtle. Like the colours are quite soft. I think it is compared to what I put out previous. And I was like, well, that's exactly what legacy as subtraction is. Like when you take something away and you leave a clearer path for others, it's not kind of obvious what you're doing. And I wanted to play on that only a few people get to experience the whole of that, that they see what you're doing and what you've metabolized as a person. And I got to play with that in the metaphor that, if you were to collect one of these, you got the physical paper. Obviously, the flowers aren't there. And, you got the intimate. You got to explore something that not everyone gets to explore with on-chain art. So I'm like, I'm stoked with this collection. Like really, really, it's been cool.
Yeah, it seems like it's been a very deeply passionate endeavor, and you have just been touching on it, but I'd love for you to explore it a little bit more whilst we're having this chat about how this is, I guess, your first collection where there is a physical involved. So there is that interesting relationship between this preserved digital piece and then somebody having a physical piece as part of collecting.
Yeah, and the first couple of collections I released late 21 on ETH, like early 22, they were big oil paintings. And I always thought about how you could kind of integrate the digital and the physical with them being a pair. So with those ones, I've put words on top of the oil painting. So the digital is slightly different to the physical. And I've always liked that because I feel like you've understood each canvas and how they can like how they can talk to each other. You've they are two assets. Um, so it's taken me a couple, like 3 years to get back to how to do that again. How would I do that with the roses that I work with and the mirror that I work on and the canvases that I work? What would be of worth, to send a physical around the world? Why would you want the physical when the digital's there? Is there any extra in getting that? But for this kind of concept or story that I want to tell with this collection, it fits perfectly. I'm like, I couldn't imagine it being any other way. So yeah, whether that comes up again in the future with collections, I'm not sure. I haven't sent work overseas in a while, so I'm excited for that, and I'm excited to, yeah, if one was to get collected, you have that initial sale and conversation, and then maybe 3 weeks down the line, they get the physical and they get to hold it in front of the digital and see the differences and kind of. I look forward to maybe sharing that feeling with people.
I really like that, sharing the expression, sharing the feeling with people. I pulled up one of the pieces. This one's called "No Strangers Remembered Her." A deeply
Oh
emotive name,
yeah.
and people can perceive the names in the way in which they want. You've explored again, light and there's shadow in some of the pieces. There's that softer coloring, but there's that obviously that cohesion of you using flowers. You can see that. Is it a black paint on this one, which is a bit dark? It's a bit of a gut punch, this one, and even though it's kind of like light in its own way as well. I really like this one. I like a lot of them. I'd love to know your relationship with flowers, because obviously we see you use flowers, and then yeah, like obviously you don't have to say how I create each piece and really break it down, but I am curious, just where does it start? How did this one come to be, for example? It's this kind of like beautiful, almost happy colorway, and then there's this splotch of black, which is a hard feeling, at least for me.
Mm. So flowers, I don't think I've spoken about it maybe on this chat anyway. But flowers first, when we lost our son, when you lose someone, everyone sends flowers. It's kind of what happens here in New Zealand, probably the Western world, I would say, maybe all over. So people send flowers, and what else do you do? Like, I'm very much one of those people. So I was receiving truckloads of flowers. The whole lounge was a whole bouquet. Um, and then you're very present and you're very vulnerable at that time. And I would just watch these flowers just wilt, and that's pretty much exactly what I had just watched, in life. And I couldn't believe that someone would send you something that would just wilt, that it wouldn't last, that we just get to live this over again. Um, and sometimes I would, probably not supposed to say this, but I would throw the bouquet out before it wilted, before the end. I was just like, yeah, what you do in those times is kind of interesting in reflection. So that's where the flower. So I didn't touch flowers. I painted flowers, but I didn't touch flowers themselves for about 2 years until I was kind of game enough go there again and feel that again. And the paint is that suffocation, that loss of breath, really. So that continues to come through these collections, and I just find that such a powerful way to explain life and the contrast that it is often always happening in real time. Life is so polarizing, and if you can find kind of a middle in it, it can be really cool. Yeah, I hope that answers your question, but that's kind of the origin of flowers in my work and paint. And then, yeah, can continue that on in forms like legacy and, yeah, what we're leaving behind. And particularly in this work, because now I've taken those flowers away. So maybe now that person has left, and what have they physically, what have they left imprinted on you? There, yeah, that.
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting thing to explore, having experienced the same thing. He's obviously not being the mother, but being the father, and so that's a different experience in itself, naturally. Interestingly, in the Jewish religion, that you don't give flowers for that very reason. So it's fascinating culturally how that works. Yeah, just as a tidbit on the side. So I feel you, and yeah, thank you for being so raw and honest about that whole experience and explaining how that comes into your work. I've pulled up the work on Shane, so this is on ordinals.com. So we can see this is the parent. When I say this, for people who can't see it, I might get you to explain it because it's a bit tricky if they're not watching. But there's the parent. We can see your grandparent above it. So that's kind of like the overarching inscription. Oh, no, that would be another one. And then there's another. It's a whole family tree of inscriptions. And then the collection that sits underneath. So I'll get you to explain what we're looking at here, and I guess perhaps why you chose it. And then we were touching on it before. There is more information. There's more metadata, it's called, on Shane. There's more information that's tied to it from, they're called traits in terms of the names, but you've got the title and a description and further thoughts and a metaphor. Really interesting stuff I encourage people to read. But yeah, talk to us about choosing the parent for the collection and what we're looking at in regards to the parent on Shane here.
Yeah, the parent for this collection came after. I didn't kind of have an idea on what, yeah, the overriding, or it is often it sits at the bottom. I visualize it sitting at the bottom, so it's under each piece, and how that adds to the artwork too, because it's visually often there. So this parent is, or visually or technically, is all the petals from the 16 works, came together. Felt appropriate to kind of pull it all together. And I wanted this, yeah, it's probably darker than the other works. It reminds me of death more than the other works kind of remind me of legacy or life or what's left. But yeah, visually that's what I chose. That's what I felt that would fit there best. And then I just went a bit crazy on the metadata. Metadata's funny. Like, that was literally that weekend, everyone was talking about traits and names, and it had changed a little bit. And I'm like, I'm here just being an artist, doing it however it's going to go. I don't know how this links back to, what it's meant to be. But so that was quite fun. Further thoughts? I had a lot of fun with it. But that's what that parent is.
Yeah, and that conversation was funny. I think as long as there's metadata there, it gives context because it is permanent and it's going to be here when we're not here. People can read it and see it and get that context. Context is so important. I remember having a discussion with Violet Bond, who you also know, and she was thinking about, and I know you've done this, about adding notes, adding context to that family tree, because yeah, if you're not there to talk about it, it can still be read about. It can still be understood. There are going to be perhaps like these blockchain archivists in the future who are digging up this on-chain work, and they'll be able to make sense of what you put on chain, as well as obviously like perceive and however the artworks, however they'd like to perceive them as well.
Yes, yeah, that's cool that she kind of thinks about that broader look as well. We've got Twitter. Twitter holds a lot of that information, or X holds a lot of that information. The background chat or the work in progress chat. But I'm like, well, what happens when that's not a thing? Or, how do we are also reliant on this app. Of course we are, but what if we didn't have to for certain information that you wanted to last a little longer? So yeah, we put notes in.
Yeah, I think it's really important and great that you've done it. You've also been showcased in some IRL events, and I'm, hopefully, and I think that this collection will as well. I've pulled up just another piece. They stood taller because of her. Again, very
Um,
interesting name. Like you said, when people receive the physical, the flowers and the petals won't be there, so we don't know what it looks like underneath, but you can kind of get a bit of an idea. It's yeah. When you came up with the idea of providing the physicals and the obviously the petals are ephemeral and they're going to wilt and die, and so they're removed. Yeah, how did you ensure that you, I guess, felt authentic about what remained, which is very fitting given the title of the collection?
yeah, I like these works. The background, I guess, the yellow you're seeing on that
Mm.
that that came together over about 4 months. I've tweeted about these works in various stages, um, and then my heart kind of beat differently when I saw them. I'm like, oh, we're so close to where we need to be. So I guess there's control over that look, but the last mark that was left is very in the moment. Uh, yeah, going with the feeling, quite physically throwing petals at these paintings. So I don't quite know either, and I guess we as artists like to get an experience too. So that's what's happening there, and then so you kind of photograph it, and then you take the petals away, and you're like, this is yeah. I'm a bit going with it as well at that particular end of the creation process. I did think about like I have kept the petals, but kind of keeping them separate that I would then send them to the collector. Um, but I haven't quite got, I haven't done that. But I do think about that too, that they would get to see that wilt as well. But maybe in time we can get to that. But some look quite different to what you've got. And I also thought about on my website whether I would show the painting, without the petals and with, but I was like, oh, we get to have a chance at giving people an experience, and having a reason that you would like to be the primary collector. Yeah, it kind of brings that intimate more into it as opposed to everyone seeing everything.
That makes a lot of sense, and there's so many interesting parallels with that relinquishing control, and you're not quite sure what the final output or the final artwork is going to look like, and there's so much of that comes through in our life as well. You've written about the metaphor with the parent. There's a lot of metaphors that can be made, aren't there?
Mm. Yes, yeah, there are. Like I kind of honed in on one, but I'm like, I look forward to seeing what other people feel when they've got the two. There's a lot. It's cool. It's quite opening. I think it opens pathways. Hopefully, yeah.
So it's been a wonderful chat. As always, it's been great to see you. And then yesterday, Pavel are my first guests who have been on 3 times, because this has become a show now. We're published. Beyond the Canvas is the show name. And we've had our partner artist feature, and then I spoke with you when we had Hafka and Eka, who are also wonderful artists. And now we have our third show. So it's been an absolute pleasure. I've thoroughly enjoyed getting to know you and continuing this journey with you and seeing your growth and collecting you as well. So thank you so much for your time. Very excited about what remains with you. I'm not sure if there's anything that you wanted to share that we haven't gone through, or any sort of closing thoughts.
Um, no, they are ready to send, so I will be getting them out as people buy them, which is kind of exciting. And they are small, so I hope they are they're not framed, which is also interesting to sell something that's not framed, because you don't quite know. Yeah, that's also had to let go of some things there. And I wonder if people will just kind of quietly tuck them in their drawer as personal pieces, or if they will end up on walls. And that's a journey in itself. But so they are, they're kind of ready to go if you are looking to get the physical. in a timely manner. That's easy. But no, just very happy that it's on chain and how it's come together. Very happy to offer something physical to some people who love that aspect of art. And thank you so much for your time today. That's really stoked. Thank you.
Nah, true pleasure. Thanks so much, Zoe. It's been so much fun as always.